Hi class, welcome back. Now we are going to have part 2 of lesson 3. So the last video that we've watched, we were able to understand the different aspect of the self on its cognitive construct. So we were able to identify the difference between the mental constructs and the self schema. Now let's continue on this part. So again, in this lesson, we are going to have lesson 3, the self as cognitive construct, part 2. Okay, so last time or in our last video, we were able to discuss about self-awareness. Now, let's continue on about self-awareness. Now, Carver and Shire identified two types of self. So in here, that we can be aware of. So that's number 1, the private self. Number 2, the public self. Let's go to the private self. The private self, or your internal standards and private thoughts and feelings. So the private self entails us of our internal being. It entails us our thoughts and our feelings that others can't see. They might suspect that you feel something or they might notice something, but this is something that is private of yours. For example, your thoughts about your classmate or your family. This is where our self-schema and mental constructs play along. So this is something that others can influence or might not influence at all. This is our private self. Next, let's go to the public self. The public self, or your public image, commonly geared towards having a good presentation of yourself to others. So the public self, in psychology, this is what we call the mask, or the persona. The public self is the image that we show our friends, or our family members, or the people that we like about ourselves. Alright, so others might think that their private self, or that their personality changes depending on the group that they belong. For example, Anna is a student from Trinity University of Asia. Since she is enrolled in Trinity and it's a Christian school, she acts like very spiritual. But when she is with her friends, she acts differently. She acts like she's a very enjoys adventurous person. So as you can see, her public self can change. She is very spiritual when she is in school, or she can be very adventurous, very a risk taker with her friends. Our public self depends on the people around us. It can vary and change as well. It depends on us. So in here, Carver and Shire was able to identify that if you are self-aware, you were able to identify that there are two types of self. That is the private self, your own thoughts, feelings, and your public self, the image that you are showing to your friends or your classmates and many more. Self-awareness, like what we were able to mention at the previous video, is that you are becoming aware of yourself. Now let's continue on that. Self-awareness also presents us with at least 3 other self-schema: actual self, ideal self, and the auth self. Let's go to the first part, or the first one. The actual self is who you are at the moment. In psychology, we have this term being mindful. When you say you are being mindful, you are being aware of what is happening today or at the present moment. You are aware of your own feelings, whether you are happy, sad, or a bit down for today. And also you are aware of how you will react to someone at the present moment. That is the actual self. Being mindful at the present moment, or the mindfulness that you are doing at the present moment. That is the actual self. The actual self is who you are at the present moment. That is you. Now let's go to the ideal self. This is who you like to be. So if you have an idol or a leader that you wanted to become, that is or the leader you want to that inspires you and you wanted to become just like him or her, that is your ideal self. For example, Anna is your classmate. She's very smart, athletic, talented, and knows how to handle difficult situations. You admire her and wants to be smart, talented, athletic, and is able to handle difficult situations as well. You wanted to have her qualities. So the wanting part there, or the idea of wanting those kinds of qualities, just like Anna has, is your ideal self. This is who you like to be. Alright, and then next let's go to the odd self. The odd self is who you think you should be. Alright, so odd self is is focusing more on you should be, who you should be. For example, you are Anna. Anna is just a simple girl who goes to school and gets home. Now her parents keeps on telling her that to be successful in life, she should be very smart in school, very religious or spiritual, and a very caring child. So in her mind, she thinks that she needs to be that kind of person, the person that her mother wants. So she keeps on thinking and telling herself that I should be that person. So that's the odd self. As you can see, the actual self is at the present moment who you are. The ideal self is the ideas or the self that you like to be. And the odd self is the thing or the idea of the self that you think that who you should be. Ideal self and odd self are often confused by others. But don't be confused, because the ideal self is the thing that who you like to be. The odd self tells you who you should be. There's something that should be. All right, it can be influenced by others. While ideal self is you are only influencing yourself. It is inspired by yourself. But odd can be influenced by others. Self-awareness may be positive or negative, depending on the circumstances and our next course of action. Again, self-awareness is being aware of yourself, your strengths, and your weaknesses. But it can be positive or negative. It depends on the circumstances and our next course of action. So, for example, your classmate is very talented. So you, as a normal classmate, or just who watches your classmate, think positively or negatively about yourself. So let's have another example. For example, let's go to Anna again. Anna is a very smart individual. She got all the high grades in class. And you As an average performer, things like this way. You are self-aware. Okay, so you think that I am not as smart as Anna. So that can be negative. Or I think Anna is really smart and I am not good at anything at all. So that's negative. But if you say just like this, Anna is smart, but I know I can do the same if I do the same efforts. So that's positive. As you can see, self-awareness can be positive or negative. Now let's go to the next one. Our group identity and self-awareness also has a great impact on our self-esteem. Self-esteem defined as our own positive or negative perception or evaluation of ourselves. So let's go first to the concept of self-esteem. Self-esteem is what we see of ourselves depends, or it can be positive or negative. It is how we perceive or evaluate ourselves, just like what I did a while ago. So we think that Anna is good, and you think that you can do better than her. So your self-esteem can be high, or your self-esteem can be low. You can say that Anna is smart and I am dumb. So that's a low self-esteem. That is a negative self-awareness. Alright, so that is self-awareness. Again, self-awareness is our perception of ourselves. It can be positive or negative. Positive entails to a high self-esteem. Negative entails to a low self-esteem. Again, our group identity and self-awareness has a great impact on our self-esteem. Let's continue. Let's continue on self-esteem. So, one of the ways in which our social relationship affects our self-esteem is through our social comparison. So sometimes, again, like what I've mentioned, self-esteem is our perception of ourselves. It can be positive or negative. Now, social comparison affects our self-esteem. So if we are, again, we are social beings, or we tend to socialize with others. Since we are social beings, we tend to compare ourselves to others. So that is called the social comparison. There are two types of social comparison. First, the downward social comparison, and second, the upward social comparison. Let's go to the downward social comparison. The downward social comparison is the more common type of comparing ourselves with others, by comparing ourselves with those who are worse off than us. Alright, so in here, we tend to compare ourselves to those individuals who are worse than us. So we tend to downward. That's why it's called downward, is we are comparing ourselves to those who are worse of us. And then let's go now to the upward. The upward social comparison, which is comparing ourselves with those who are better off than us. So in downward comparison, we are comparing ourselves to those who are worse of us. And upward social comparison, we compare ourselves to those who are better than us. For example, for the downward social comparison, we often compare ourselves to, as a student, for example, we compare ourselves to those who weren't able to go to school. So we compare ourselves to those who are worse of us. With downward social comparison, some people get a bit high self-esteem because they think that they are more capable because they were able to compare themselves to others who are worse than them. That is the downward social comparison. The upward social comparison, again, is comparing ourselves with those who are better than us. It can sometimes lead to low self-esteem. like my example a while ago. Anna is very smart, so you as an average student was able to compare yourself to her. So you think in a negative way or in a positive way, or in a negative way rather, is Anna is smart and I am not. Maybe I'm a little bit below average than her. So that's upward social comparison. You compare yourself to the ones who are better than you. It can sometimes lead to low self-esteem. Alright, so again, downward social comparison might lead to an high self-esteem. Upward social comparison might lead to low self-esteem. But a disclaimer, again, self-esteem is our perception of ourselves. It can be positive or negative. So downward and upward social comparison can yield us a positive self-esteem or a negative self-esteem. It depends. But in my example, I just gave that for you to understand more on social. Now let's continue. Social comparison also entails what is called self-evaluation maintenance theory, which states that we can feel threatened when someone outperforms us, especially when that person is close to us. So self-evaluation maintenance theory is a theory that states that whenever we are close to someone and they perform better than us, we are threatened by them. For example, Anna and Angela are friends. Anna performs more in school. Because they are close, Angela feels threatened by her. She feels that Anna will perform better than her and she needs to perform better so she can exceed Anna. Self-evaluation maintenance theory states that we tend to be threatened by those who are close to us. That is because of social comparison. In the attempt to increase or maintain self-esteem, some people become narcissistic, a trait characterized by overly high self-esteem, self-admiration, and self-centeredness. So sometimes when a person who has a low self-esteem wants to maintain a high or wants to have a high self-esteem and maintain it, tends to be narcissistic. Just a disclaimer, narcissistic or being narcissistic is not an adjective, or the term narcissistic is not an adjective. It cannot describe an individual. It should not be used as an adjective. Okay, narcissistic in here tells us that this is a trait characterized by overly high self-esteem, self-admiration, and self-centeredness. Sometimes a person who is narcissistic tends to love themselves and think that they are good or better than anyone else. They think that they are the smartest in the room. They think they are the most prettiest, they are the prettiest, or they think that they are the talented ones. Sometimes they also think that the people needs them. So that is narcissistic. That's being narcissistic. So an individual who is narcissistic tends to pull up their self-esteem and wants to maintain it. That's why they are narcissistic. In psychology, there is a disorder that is characterized with narcissism. That is a narcissistic personality disorder. But that is the disorder. But in here, some people tend to be narcissistic, but not all the time. Sometimes they are not narcissistic in a specific situation. Sometimes they are not. This is narcissism sometimes is a response of the self-evaluation maintenance theory. If they feel threatened, they will raise their self-esteem and become narcissistic. But again, not all the time. There is a thin line between high self-esteem and narcissism, and there are a lot of tests and measurement for self-esteem like the Rosenberg scale. Now, as individuals who doesn't have an enough background to psychology, if you wanted to know if you have a high self-esteem or a narcissism, I do suggest that you check out some of the free standardized online psychological assessment about self-esteem and narcissism. Okay, so some of it, or one example of a psychological assessment or a test on self-esteem and narcissism, is the Rosenberg scale. But I do suggest that if you try this scale, try to have guidance with a professional, like a registered psychometrician or a registered psychologist, for you to better understand yourself, whether you are having just a high self-esteem or you are just being, or you have a narcissism. Okay, so again, self-esteem or the level of your self-esteem and narcissism cannot be given by anyone or by anyone who just wanted to say that you are. It should be measured by psychological means through psychological test or psychological assessment. Though self-esteem is a very important concept related to the self, studies have shown that it only has a correlation, not causality, to positive outputs and outlook. So in here it states that self-esteem, though is important to the self, it shows no cause and effect to the positive things that we do and the positive outputs in life that we have, or the positive thinking that we have. But it only has a correlation. So it means in here that if you have a high self-esteem, you must have a positive outlook in life. For example, you believe that you can achieve things and you see things in a positive way. But our self-esteem will not cause any cause or effect on how we see the positive outputs and positive thoughts that we have. Again, self-esteem only has a relationship or shows a relationship on our positive outputs and outlooks in life. Okay, so there are programs, activities, and parenting styles to boost self-esteem. It should only be for rewarding good behavior and other achievements, and not for the purpose of merely trying to make children feel better about themselves or to appease them when they get angry or sad. So in here it states that the programs, activities, and parenting styles to boost self-esteem should not be used as as a reward or to boost someone or make someone happy when they are angry or sad. Okay, self-esteem is something that I believe, as a professor and as a history in psychology and a background rather in psychology, I believe that self-esteem can be influenced by our own choice. It can be influenced by environmental, but sometimes with good therapy, with good guidance, we can able to boost our self-esteem. But of course, for those individuals who are suffering with depression or other mood disorders, it is highly recommended that if they have a low self-esteem due to their mood disorders or mental health disorders, they're highly suggested and recommended to see as a mental health professional. Again, self programs, activities, and other parenting styles that encourages to boost self-esteem should not be used in to a child or for children just to raise their angry or sad situation. Okay? With proper guidance, someone's self-esteem can be boosted. So that's it for now. So that's the part 2 of this session. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Our chat box in Messenger, FB Messenger, is always open. So please do type there your questions and your suggestions. So thank you, see you, and bye for now.